And we now have Rosie, do we?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Please state your full name.
Rosemary Wright.
And repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely,
I do solemnly and sincerely
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Rosie, we've heard from Bill about the circumstances of his infection in May 1986. Is there anything, first of all, in relation to those circumstances and the events around May 1986 that you wanted to add to?
Not particularly about the events leading up to him being given the factor VIII. I wonder why it wasn't picked up, why when he went to A&E and he came back and said, I've got water on the knee, and why you would have a hematoma and then it would become water on the knee. Don't understand that. But I can confirm what he said in his statement. I wasn't there on the night that he was given factor VIII. I was working in Perth.
Can I then take you forward a few weeks in 1986 to July 1986, when Bill was told by Dr. Ludlam that he had non-A, non-B hepatitis. And I'm just going to ask to have put up on screen one document. It's 2287012. Thank you. And it's the bottom of that first page. It's the entry of the 11th of July 1986, explained about abnormal LFTs, reassured that most likely diagnosis is non-A, non-B hepatitis, patient is symptomatic nausea and feeling off colour, advised to avoid alcohol until, at least till LFTs return to normal. What can you, first of all, were you present when Dr. Ludlam gave Bill the diagnosis?
I don't know. I don't remember being present on that occasion. I think I did go back for one other appointment, but I was working and it wasn't in Edinburgh. So, but my understanding from Bill was that, yes, you've got this non-A, non-B, and we did understand, because he was told the next day about the 50% risk of that dually, that's what he was showing. And he was off colour. He's explained himself about being away in the north of England and feeling really ill when he didn't expect to be. And because we understood it to be something that was there but should resolve, and my recollection is it should be self-limiting. And that's consistent with our understanding that, yes, he needed to not drink alcohol. He didn't drink any alcohol on the night of our wedding, but that this was something that would play out over time, and we were not particularly concerned about it.
And we have the term used in the notes is reassured. You, as I understand it, simply got on with your lives. You got married in August of 1986, and you continued with your plans, moved to Manchester, unaware that there was any significant ongoing health issue.
Yes, I mean, we didn't, that summer in 86, we were still in Edinburgh. It was only at the beginning of 1987 that the opportunity for the job down south came up. And so Bill secured that job. So he moved from a permanent contract to what we knew was a fixed-term contract without any notion that this was going to, this illness would have any kind of long-lasting impact on our lives. Which is why the following year it was such a shock when we found out that he still had it and it was serious.
And what do you recall of learning that Bill's illness was a serious one and that he had a potential prognosis of only 10 years?
It's a complete shock. He remembers the day that he was told that. I remember the day he was told that because I'd got home from work and I can see myself beside the phone and he's telling me on the phone. And we were young, we were not long married, the world was our oyster. We still felt in those days, and so it was a complete shock and our lives changed.
You've drawn a contrast in your statement between the understanding of the nature and seriousness of the condition that the two of you gleaned following the consultations that Bill had in Manchester, compared to the information that had been given in Edinburgh by Dr. Ludlam. Mm-hmm. Is there anything further you would want to say about that?
Only that it became clear much more of the ramifications. So he was given the news that day, and I subsequently was at the next appointment. And it was with Dr. Warnes, and he explained about the seriousness of the condition. He explained about transmission. We asked, what does this mean about having children? And he said, well, there is a risk to me, but they thought it to be a low risk. And his advice was, if you want to have children, go ahead and do it. I don't remember being given any written information at that time, but certainly that was quite a thorough consultation.
Now, before I ask you about the impact upon you and family life, and indeed your observations of the impact on Bill of the cycle of treatments he went through, just wanted to ask you very specifically about the meeting with Dr. Ludlam that took place in, I understand, about 1999. Mm-hmm. This was after there'd been the initiation, or around the time of initiation of legal proceedings. Mm-hmm. What can you recall about that?
I think it's the discomfort that we felt. We were about to serve a summons. You've heard from Bill that we went for many years thinking that this is just life. There wasn't any question particularly about his treatment. Then in 1996, we understood differently and began to look into this more. And we were going to serve a summons, and Dr. Ludlam invited us to meet with him in his office. It must have been in the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary. I can't remember exactly where, but I can see the office. And it was, and I say it was uncomfortable because we felt that we were being told, what do you mean, why do you think this? Surely you've got this wrong, your understanding that maybe you didn't have the best treatment. So I do remember him talking about going through other sorts of treatment. And my recollection is that he said, I can't say that if I'd been there on the night, you wouldn't have had factor VIII. That's what I remember. But he certainly didn't say, I would have given you factor VIII.
Do you recall any discussion in that meeting about his views on giving DDAVP?
I think, I don't recall in detail, but I think he did go through, and I'm presuming that he had reasons why he didn't think that, or there may have been issues with DDAVP. That wasn't necessarily the obvious choice.
So Can I ask you to describe from your perspective the cycle of treatments that Bill went through and the impact those treatments had on him, on you and on your lives?
And what I would say, it's just years of uncertainty, anxiety and fear, really, because we went into we had our first child, and then treatment became available. Before that, he had a biopsy to see if treatment would be necessary. And he went in, and I went to collect him after he'd had the biopsy. He'd had DDAVP. It was very effective. And he came home, and he was being sick all the way home. And then that evening, he woke up and said, "I've got a real pain. I'm really scared." And I actually thought he was going to die, because I thought he was, potentially that was his liver bleeding, because we knew that was a possible side effect. So I had to get a friend to come and be in the house with our daughter, and I drove him back the 25 miles to Manchester. In the end, it was okay. It settled down. They considered that probably the pain was to do with the amount of retching that he'd done. But that was the first time I was really scared. As regards to treatment, I think we went into the first treatment fairly upbeat, not realising what it would be like. And I think that you can read, and there wouldn't have been much to read in those days, but you can kind of read the side effects, but it doesn't really equip you for what then happens. And he was ill. He was particularly ill immediately after the injections he had to give himself. And he was just ill for the whole period, really. So we were both working. He was working, and therefore that's really all that he could do. So from my perspective, it was about also working and looking after our daughter.
What was the effect of the hope of a treatment working, the treatment not working, a while later trying again, having the hope that the treatment might work and having that hope dashed and having that done repeatedly?
I think that's what wears you down, because between the start of that treatment and, say, at the end of 2015, when he has had this sustained response from the most recent treatment, it's just years and years of not knowing where you stand. All the time, you've got to keep you haven't got to keep trying the treatment, but you feel you need to keep trying the treatment. And each time, and particularly the time in 2001, that was more than physical symptoms. That affected him psychologically quite badly during the treatment, and that's quite scary. Being the person who's the closest, being the person who's got 2 children to protect. And we then went through really difficult years.
And I'm not proposing to ask you anything further about those particular years. Bill's already spoken about them.
Mm-hmm.
In 2007, following the 4th course of treatment, which again failed, we've heard from Bill about the chronic fatigue condition. And I'd like your perspective on that, please.
And that's what I mean by just years and years of one thing after another. I just felt we were always on the wrong side of the statistics. You need to try treatment because time's running out. But treatment is, we were really, really concerned about doing the treatment. He was really concerned about trying treatment again after our experience in 2001. And We prepared for it because each time you had to prepare for it and think, well, we're not going to be able to do these things, and financially that's an added burden. And the stark contrast is that, which is in my statement, is that the weekend before he started treatment, one of our sets of parents looked after the children to allow us a weekend away, and we had a full rock climbing and hill walking day, and he's never been able to do that again. He started the treatment, he didn't stay on it very long. He was dragging himself out of bed in the morning to go to work. He didn't stay on the treatment, and his health just never recovered, and that was devastating. But it's another, it's like you pick yourself up. Bill turned his life around in 2006, and we had quite a good year. And then it was all just shot down again.
The loss to Bill of the hills and mountains was very obvious during his evidence. And it sounds from your evidence as though it's a loss to you too, because it's something you can no longer do together.
Yeah, it's something I still do, but Bill can't do. And I suppose you come together as a couple. It's easier to have a long-term relationship when you've got things in common, and that was how we met. And that was what we did. That was what we did with our friends. And that's mostly been lost to Bill. But from that treatment in 2007, he then had to give up work. We couldn't get any explanation. Nobody kind of could answer any questions as to why we were in this situation. At first, it was suggested that it might still be the interferon in his system and he should improve, even though it hadn't taken very long on the previous 2 occasions, or 3 occasions, counting the small course of treatment in 1997. But it just didn't. And so we then spent the next 3 or 4 years searching for answers. And because there was nothing different in his liver function test, there was nothing clinically different to indicate that his liver was any worse. So those years then, we spent searching for answers on what could we do to help this situation. And that's aside from the financial impact, of course. And we did eventually, we went through a whole, course, as anybody who's been diagnosed with chronic fatigue understands. It's a diagnosis of exclusion. So we tried this and we tried that. And we did have a second opinion in Newcastle. And I think that supported the view that it must have been caused by the interferon or the ribavirin, whatever, the treatment. So our life changed. In 2006, Bill was taking our daughter out rock climbing, and 2007 onwards, we couldn't do that.
In 2012, Bill had what you thought initially was a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And you've described that to me as an example of how you became, how things going wrong became normal. I wonder if you could tell us about that.
Generally, Bill has, apart from the hepatitis, Bill has been generally well. He's not had other significant health problems. And if he'd never had the hepatitis, we might have had quite an ordinary, quite a nice life. In 2012, he had chest pains, and he'd had them for probably maybe on and off for 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And they were getting worse, and it was Saturday afternoon, and you're thinking, maybe we should not leave this. So we phoned NHS 24, and they said, you better go with chest pains, you better go into the hospital. And there's a GP unit there. So we went there, and he was put on the monitor, And the doctor said, yes, Mr. Wright, I think I have to inform you that you are having a heart attack. Sorry?
You were sitting there.
Yes, I was there, yeah. And I can just remember thinking, what next? And I almost felt, and I remember that thinking, my goodness, you've just got so hardened to bad news that I don't think I even cried, because it's about that you steel yourself. You've had to steel yourself inside. The funny thing is that we then got taken up to the cardiac unit. They did further tests and said, we can't see any sign of a heart attack. We think the doctor downstairs put the pads on, or whatever it is, the wrong way round, and that's what gave the funny. But I do reflect on that and think, just think this is just one more thing. Around that time, his alpha-fetoprotein and platelets and that were beginning to cause more concern. So between 2000 about 2012-ish, we spent those 3 years thinking the next scan is going to show, is potentially going to show a tumour. So I see things in different phases, but there's always something. And so your life is just, you've never got a clear road ahead.
In 2015, Bill had the treatment which finally cleared the virus. But how had his health been in the run-up to the treatment?
His health was getting worse. There's no doubt about that. His health was getting worse. He was sick most mornings, or throwing up most mornings. He was increasingly having days where he was nauseous, and he still does if he gets tired. It's about being able to pace yourself, and sometimes you can't do that, and sometimes the fatigue is quite unpredictable. And we've kind of tried to work out, well, what was it why has it come on now? But it is unpredictable, and that makes things difficult to plan for. In that particular period, we had got to a point where we weren't planning for more than 3 months ahead. We wouldn't have booked a holiday for more than 3 months ahead, because we were expecting at the next appointment to be told, yes. And we knew that time was running out. Dr. Hayes at one point, and I think round about 2012, sort of said maybe 5 years of normal life left, because he was at year 25. And there was, and in the run-up to just call it the new treatment, we were having these conversations, but Bill was very reluctant. He was very, very anxious about taking new treatment because of our experience of what we had gone through with other treatments, starting from Factor VIII.
I wanted to ask you about the impact of Bill's illnesses and the treatments that he received and the consequences of those on family life, on you and on the children.
The way that I would just say, and I've spoken to folk here, is that you do your best. You're in it together. As a partner, you have to just pick up the slack. You have to be strong. You're not always strong, and sometimes you're impatient. But you have to be aware of that your partner is living with not expecting to live very long. And therefore, when there's decisions to be made, say, for example, about money, it's difficult to say, well, we need to save that money, or we shouldn't be spending it on something frivolous, when you know that your loved one might not be there that long to spend it at all. And I think that underlying insecurity about money is a theme that has been, is for a lot of people, is all those years of not knowing you can't plan. So the impact on us as a family is that our children grew up with uncertainty. Now, I like to think that we protected them as much as we could and that they've had a normal-ish life. As Bill said, they are fine. They recognise that there was some very tough times. But they are fine. For me, I think I've described that it's a weariness. It's what's going to happen next. I have become the breadwinner. Our life might have been different. We would have done it differently. I would have worked more part-time and been at home with children. Bill's not without skills. He was, I believe, he was robbed of a career because of it. And I've had to pick up the slack and work. And thank goodness I have had the ability to work, that I have a professional qualification and have been able to support the family. Otherwise, particularly in those years from 2007 until more recently, we were beginning to really struggle financially, because when you lose your income, you just, what savings you have just get whittled away.
The impression that, or one impression that emerges from your statement in relation to financial impact, is the insecurity that engendered.
Mm-hmm. I spent all those years not feeling that was financially secure, not able to plan for the future, with that dilemma of, well, what do we use the money on that we have got? What do we use that on? Our children worked from the age of 14, and you might say, well, that's a good thing. They've learned how to deal with money, but they learned for that reason. And I felt myself in a situation where I could potentially have earned more money. I could have gone for different jobs, but that it would just have all been too much if Bill was going to be ill, if he was going to have more treatment and it was going to be as horrendous as before, or if he was going to become really seriously ill. And obviously other people have had to give up work to care, and that was something that I had already discussed with my work to sort of find out what my situation would be, particularly between 2012 and 2015. And I have stayed with my current employer for various reasons, but one of them being that I'm a long-standing employee. And I felt that I would, because that felt like it was going to be really quite a realistic possibility, that they would treat me well, with, they would give me some discretion.
And I wonder if you can give us a sense of how everything you've described has just impacted day to day on ordinary living, social life.
Mm-hmm. It's had its ups and downs, and on a day-to-day basis, we go along. You get on with your life. People will see Bill publicly, and what you don't see is Bill coming back from doing whatever and desperate to get to his bed, dragging himself up the stairs. We actually discussed should we be trying to move to a bungalow because of those stairs, and the tiredness, and which makes that unpredictable, which has meant that we do have a social life, but we don't have the social life that we would have done, because quite often Bill just, I'm just too tired. We obviously don't do the same all the same leisure pursuits that we would have done. And that has been a source of regret, sadness, and also it's a strain on your relationship in the sense of meeting both people's needs. So Bill's always supported me to go away and do my hill walking, which I'm still doing. But we then have to find other things that we do together. We would have done that. We would have been doing that together with other friends. The children have been they were used to through their school life coming back and their father being in bed in the afternoon and having to sometimes, well, not sometimes, having to work round. Dad's too tired. We can't do this, Dad's too tired. That's not to say we haven't done some nice things. And my daughter reflected when we were going through our statements that she recognises now that what she considered was her normal life actually isn't other people's normal life, and that they lived with this shadow. I think that's what I would describe it. It's a big cloud, big shadow that affects lots of different aspects of your life.
Rosie, those are the questions I have for you. Do you have anything further you would like to say?
Not in the same way as Bill. I'd just like to say that I think the whole issue of communication between doctors and patients is crucial. And I hope from this inquiry something will come that about lessons learned, and how lessons learned about how patients and doctors work in partnership. That gives patients sort of more, I suppose, more control and more knowledge. I recognise things have changed. Certainly from our experience, we deal with my own health conditions whenever I've had to see a doctor in a different way, because I'm not going to just allow somebody to say it's this and I know best. But I also want justice I want people to be able to move on, because this inquiry or an inquiry that really gets to the truth of things should have happened years ago. And for people who've been infected, you maybe can't turn the clock back on that happened, but there's too many years that people were ignored and successive governments did nothing. And that's added to the distress, I think, certainly for me and Bill, but I think possibly for other people as well.
Rosie, I'm just going to ask Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Dawson if there's anything else. There isn't? No. So.
I have nothing to ask either, but let me just say thank you to both of you. Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you for listening.
Well, we'll take a break. It'll be a short break, 20 minutes. So we'll start again at just after 2.